"Hey everyone, we're working hard to get our first 1,000 subscribers, sign up and you won't regret it." She said it like a prophecy. You'll beg to come back. Not screaming. Not crying. Just that cold certainty people get when they think they already won. I remember the way the kitchen light hit the edge of the counter, the way the dishwasher hummed like it was trying to fill the silence for us. I remember how calm my hands looked even though my chest felt like someone had put a boot on it. I didn't give her what she wanted. Not the argument, not the pleading, not the theatrics. I just said, maybe, and left. That's the part that keeps coming back to me, how one small word can change the temperature of a room. Her confidence flickered for a second, like a candle catching a draft. Then it hardened again. I walked out with my car keys and my phone and a duffel bag I hadn't packed until 5 minutes earlier. I didn't leave because I was brave. I left because I'd reached that exhausted place where your body stops negotiating with your mind. The part of you that still wants love gets outvoted by the part of you that wants peace. Our relationship didn't end in one blow. It ended in a slow accumulation of tiny humiliations, her jokes about my job, the way she'd answer texts with her screen angled away, the new password on her phone after 4 years of not caring, the sudden girls' nights that started happening on weekdays. The biggest change, though, was how she looked at me. People talk about cheating like it starts with sex. In my experience, it starts with contempt. That look that says you're a placeholder, an obstacle, a background character in your own life. Her name was Savannah. Mine is Owen. We were both in our early 30s. We lived outside Raleigh, in one of those neighborhoods that markets itself as quiet but really means everyone can hear your arguments through the drywall. When I left, I didn't drive far. I went to a motel off the highway because I couldn't stand the idea of bringing my mess to anyone else's doorstep. The room smelled like bleach and old air freshener. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall until my phone buzzed. Not her. My older sister, Harper. I told her, carefully, like I was walking across thin ice. I said I needed a few days. I said things weren't good. I didn't say the word affair, because once you say it, it becomes real in a way your brain can't take back. Harper didn't ask for details. She asked where I was. When I told her, she said she was coming. I told her not to. She came anyway. She arrived with a coffee and that familiar sibling look that means, I'm going to be calm right now, but later I'll be furious on your behalf. We didn't do a big heart-to-heart. I ate half a stale muffin and tried not to fall apart in front of her like a dam cracking. Are you safe? She asked. Yeah. Are you thinking clearly? I wanted to laugh. I wanted to throw up. I said, clear enough. Savannah texted me late that night. It wasn't concern. It was control. She said I was being dramatic. She said I was embarrassing her. She said I'd regret it. She said I'd be back when I realized how hard the real world is. I didn't answer. The next day, I went back to the house while she was at work. I moved like a thief in my own life. I took clothes, my laptop, my passport, the folder with our mortgage paperwork, and a shoebox of old photos that I couldn't bring myself to leave behind like trash. I also took a kitchen drawer full of receipts, because something about the numbers had started nagging at me weeks earlier. We weren't broke. We should have been comfortable. I made decent money as a project manager for a construction firm. Savannah did well in medical device sales. But somehow, there was always a reason we couldn't save. Always a reason our credit card balance never quite went down. At first, I blamed inflation. Groceries. Gas. Adult life. Then I noticed the withdrawals. Small amounts. Cash. Frequent. I thought it was her lunch money, her nail appointments, her little, treat-yourself, habits. But the pattern was weird, like someone feeding a parking meter. I took the receipts without fully understanding why. It was instinct. The part of your brain that whispers, you don't know what you're in yet. A week passed. Then 2. I stayed on Harper's couch, sleeping like someone who didn't know whether they were allowed to rest. I went to work. I answered emails. I spoke to people like a normal man. Then I'd get back to Harper's place and stare at the ceiling until the dark turned into morning. Savannah kept texting in waves. One day she'd bait me with cruelty. The next, she'd send a photo of our dog from last summer like she was pressing a bruise to see if it still hurt. Then she'd go quiet, which somehow felt worse. I didn't answer. Not because I was doing some clever strategy. Because any reply felt like letting her hands back on the steering wheel. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, my bank app sent me an alert. A charge had hit our joint card. Not groceries. Not utilities. A hotel in Charlotte. 2 nights. Then, 30 seconds later, a restaurant bill that looked like a celebration. I stared at my phone until the screen dimmed. My mouth went dry. It wasn't the charge itself. It was the audacity. Like she wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. Like my silence had convinced her I'd folded. I didn't call her. I called the credit card company and froze the account. I did it with the steady voice of a man ordering takeout. Then I opened the banking history and started scrolling back. That's when I saw it. A name I didn't recognize tied to a string of transfers over the past 6 months, small at first, then bigger. Always to the same recipient. Always described as something harmless, reimbursement, supplies, rent split. The recipient wasn't a business. It was a person. I copied the name into my notes. My phone rang an hour later. Savannah's number. I didn't pick up. She left a voicemail, and her tone wasn't angry anymore. It was sharp. Panicked. Not because she missed me. Because something she relied on had just stopped working. That night, I started building a timeline, bank transfers, cash withdrawals, weird gaps in her girls' nights. It felt obsessive, but it also felt like the first time in months I could breathe. At 11:18 p.m., a number I didn't know called my phone. Unknown area code. Not local. I almost ignored it. I was tired of surprises. But something told me to answer. I picked up, expecting a scammer, a wrong number, anything normal. Instead, a man's voice said my name like he already knew me. "Owen," he asked. "Listen, this is going to sound insane, but I think your wife is involved with my wife. And I need to talk to you before she wipes everything." My fingers went cold around the phone. And even before he said the next sentence, I knew my life wasn't done breaking yet. He told me his name was Grant. Not a name you forget once you've heard it said with that kind of tension, like the syllable itself is a warning. "I'm not trying to ruin your night," he said, which was almost funny because my night had been ruined for weeks. "I'm trying to keep you from getting completely blindsided." I sat on Harper's couch, laptop open, bank statements scattered like evidence photos. Harper was asleep in her bedroom. The apartment was quiet except for the refrigerator cycling on and off. I asked him how he got my number. He hesitated. Through our shared mess. He explained in short, careful pieces, like he was stepping over broken glass. His wife's name was Whitney. They lived in Charlotte. Married 8 years. 2 kids. Normal on the outside, he said, with the hollow laugh people have when they realize how meaningless that word is. He'd started suspecting something because Whitney had turned into a locked door person. New passcode, new routines, new distance. She'd started doing conference trips that didn't line up with her company calendar. Then Grant found a second phone. Not hidden in a dramatic way. Just tucked in a gym bag pocket like it belonged there. And on that phone, messages. Photos. Plans. Savannah's name kept appearing. Grant didn't lead with sex. He led with the thing that made his voice shake. Money. He said Whitney had been moving money out of their accounts in small chunks. He said he'd confronted her and she'd cried and said it was temporary and for something important. But on the second phone, she wasn't panicked. She wasn't guilty. She was excited. She was sending Savannah screenshots of bank balances like they were vacation photos. She was talking about timing, about signatures, about once this is done we'll be safe. "What is this?" I asked. "I don't know," Grant said. "But I know your name came up. And I know my wife said you were predictable. That you wouldn't fight. That you'd leave things alone because you hate conflict." I didn't like hearing myself described that way by a stranger through my wife's mouth. But it also hit a tender truth. I did hate conflict. I'd spent years choosing peace over pushing back. I'd called it maturity. Maybe it was just fear of being alone. Grant told me he'd saved screenshots, downloaded conversations, copied bank transfer details. He said he'd already spoken to an attorney. Then he said something that made me sit forward. "My attorney says there's a chance this isn't just cheating," Grant said. "There's a chance it's fraud. Maybe more." I asked him what more meant. He exhaled. "My wife was talking about life insurance. And your wife's name was right there next to it." The room felt smaller. I tried to keep my voice even. "What did she say?" Grant didn't quote her word for word. He didn't need to. He gave me the shape of it, how Whitney had been pushing him to update policies, to make sure everything's current, to simplify beneficiaries. How she'd been talking about protecting the kids, while texting Savannah about how men never read what they sign. "Have you changed anything?" I asked. "No," he said. I stalled. I told her I'd do it later. Then I found the phone. I stared at my own laptop, the banking page still open. I thought about Savannah asking me last year if I'd ever checked our life insurance through my job. I remembered her saying we should get serious about adult stuff. At the time, it felt responsible. Now it felt like someone had been measuring my neck for a collar. Grant said he wanted to meet. In person. Somewhere public. He offered to drive to Raleigh. I almost said no. My instincts were screaming, don't tangle your life with a stranger's. But another part of me, the part that had been ignored for too long, said you need facts. We agreed on Saturday morning at a coffee shop halfway between Raleigh and Charlotte. When I hung up, I didn't sleep. I sat there and replayed my marriage like a film with a new genre. Not romance drifting into misery, but something colder, two people using the same script on different men. The next day, Savannah texted again. She said she wanted to talk like adults. She said she was worried about me. She said she didn't understand why I was being like this. Then she added, "You can't just freeze accounts. That's illegal." That line told me more than any confession could. She wasn't worried about my feelings. She was worried about access. I didn't respond. I forwarded the text to Harper, because she'd insisted on being in the loop. Harper replied with one sentence. "Keep everything. Don't speak to her alone." Saturday came. I drove to the coffee shop early. I chose a table with my back to the wall because suddenly I was the kind of man who thought like that. I watched the door and tried to breathe. Grant arrived exactly on time. He looked like someone who used to sleep well. Clean haircut, wedding ring still on, eyes tired in a way that didn't match his age. He sat down and didn't waste time. He slid his phone across the table and opened a folder. Screenshots. Messages. Payment confirmations. Savannah's name was there, over and over, in Whitney's chat thread. They weren't just coordinating affairs. They were coordinating exits. Grant scrolled slowly, letting me read. I felt like I was watching my wife through a one-way mirror. There were messages about how to get him to sign. Messages about don't let him see the statement. Messages about we need him out of the house for the appraisal. Appraisal. I swallowed. What appraisal? Grant nodded like he'd been waiting for that. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Your wife kept mentioning your house. Ours too. Like, we're pieces in the same plan. He scrolled again. And there it was. A message that made my stomach drop. Whitney had written, once Owen leaves, she can file fast. If he doesn't contest, she gets the equity without a fight. Savannah replied with something simple and ugly, he won't contest. He hates looking crazy. Grant looked up at me. Is that true? I wanted to deny it. I wanted to say I was a fighter. But the truth was, it had been true. Until now. I handed the phone back with my hand steady but my vision slightly blurred. My brain started connecting things, the receipts I'd grabbed, the cash withdrawals, the transfers to that unknown name. What's the name? Grant asked quietly. I pulled up my notes. The transfers were to someone called Devin Ricks. Grant's face tightened. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He placed it on the table and smoothed it down. Devin Ricks, he said, is the name on my wife's second phone, under a different contact label. I stared at the paper. The name stared back. And for the first time, it hit me that Savannah wasn't just cheating. She was working a system. Grant leaned forward. My attorney thinks Devin Ricks might be the person coordinating this. Not the lover, something else. Someone who does this for a living. I heard the blood in my ears. A con artist? I asked. Maybe, Grant said. Or someone who helps people strip assets during divorce. Or someone who sells strategies. I don't know. But I know our wives are connected. And I know they're both moving money. We sat there, two men in a coffee shop, looking like normal customers to everyone else. Inside, I was rewriting my entire life. Grant tapped the phone again. There's one more screenshot. The reason I called you instead of going straight to the police. He pulled it up and turned the screen toward me. It was a photo of a document, blurry, taken quickly. But the heading was readable. Separation agreement, uncontested. And near the bottom, in the signature line, was my name typed out. Not my handwriting. Not my signature. Just my name, placed like a placeholder in a trap. Grant's voice was low. I think she's already preparing paperwork. And I think she's going to try to make it look like you agreed. My throat went tight. The mini cliffhanger wasn't dramatic. It was practical. Because at that moment, my phone vibrated on the table. A new voicemail notification. From a number I didn't recognize. And when I hit play, Savannah's voice wasn't on it. A man's voice was. He said, Owen, this is Devin Ricks. We need to talk about the documents your wife requested. There's been a complication. Devin Ricks didn't sound like a villain. That was the unsettling part. He sounded like a man who made his living being calm while other people's lives burned down. Polite. Smooth. Like a customer service rep who knows you're going to accept whatever he tells you if he says it with confidence. I looked at Grant. Grant looked at me. Both of us heard the name and felt the same thing, the floor shifting under our feet. I didn't call Devin back right there. Not yet. Grant and I walked out of the coffee shop with a plan that wasn't really a plan, more like a shared agreement to stop being passive. First, protect assets. Second, document everything. Third, get professionals involved. By Monday, I had an attorney. Her name was Camille. Older than me, calm, direct, and clearly unimpressed by drama. She listened while I laid out the timeline, Savannah's change in behavior, the unexplained transfers, the hotel charge, the screenshots Grant had shown me, and now the voicemail from Devon. Camille didn't flinch. She said, "You did one smart thing already, you left and you froze the joint account. Now we do the rest." She told me to stop communicating with Savannah except in writing, and only about logistics. She told me not to threaten her, not to accuse her, not to give her any hint that I had information from Grant. "Why?" I asked. "Because people who think they're clever get reckless when they feel cornered," Camille said. "Let her stay comfortable." That was the first time I realized the goal wasn't to win an argument. It was to build a case. Camille advised me to run my credit report that same day. I did, sitting in my car outside my office like I was about to open test results. There were inquiries I didn't recognize. Recent. A new credit card application. A personal loan pre-approval. And one that made my skin crawl, a request for information from a life insurance provider I'd never used. Camille nodded when I told her. "We locked this down." Immediately. I put fraud alerts on my credit. I changed every password. I moved my paycheck into a new individual account. I documented everything with timestamps, screenshots, and backups. Grant did the same. We stayed in touch like reluctant teammates. Then, 2 nights later, Savannah showed up at Harper's apartment. Harper called me first, whispering like we were hiding from a storm. "She's here," Harper said. "She's acting like she's worried. But it feels fake." I told Harper not to let her in. Harper didn't. Savannah stood outside the door and talked through it, like a person trying to sound reasonable for an invisible jury. She said she missed me. She said she hated where we ended up. She said she wanted to end things peacefully. She said she didn't want lawyers involved. Of course she didn't. Harper told her I wasn't there, which was true. I was parked around the corner, watching the building entrance like a man who didn't recognize himself. Savannah left after 20 minutes. Then she texted me. She said she'd be willing to be generous if I signed quickly. She said she would let me keep my truck. She said she didn't want to ruin me. I forwarded everything to Camille. Camille replied, "She's rushing." Good. That means she's on a timeline. Then I called Devon Ricks back. I put it on speaker in my car, recording the call, legal in North Carolina with one-party consent. Camille had already confirmed it. Devon answered on the second ring. "Owen," he said, like we were co-workers. "Thanks for calling back." I asked what he meant by complication. He hesitated for half a second, which told me he wasn't used to being questioned. "There are inconsistencies," he said. "Your wife requested an uncontested filing package. But certain requirements must be met, mutual consent, certain documentation." I kept my tone neutral. "What kind of inconsistencies?" Devon cleared his throat. "Your joint financial picture has changed. Accounts were frozen. A transfer schedule was interrupted." Transfer schedule. I felt my jaw tighten. I kept it from my voice. "So you were expecting ongoing transfers?" I asked. Devon paused. "That's between you and your spouse. I'm simply providing services." "What services, exactly?" I asked. He pivoted smoothly. "I assist clients in organizing paperwork, ensuring assets are appropriately documented, and expediting legal processes where possible." He didn't say lawyer. He didn't say attorney. Camille had already warned me about people who operate in the gray, consultants who aren't licensed but sell strategies. I asked him who hired him. He said, "Your wife." I asked him if he'd been working with Whitney too. Silence. Then Devon said, "I'm not authorized to discuss other clients." That was basically a confession. I asked him how he got my number. Devon said Savannah had provided it as part of the intake. I asked him if he'd prepared documents with my typed name on them. Devon said he couldn't confirm specifics without verification. It was careful language. The kind people use when they know they're skating near the edge of something illegal. Then Devon said something that made my skin go cold. "Owen," he said, "I'm going to give you advice that's outside my role, just as a person. You should speak with your wife and settle this quickly. When things drag out, people get emotional. Mistakes happen." He wasn't threatening me directly. He was suggesting danger while keeping his hands clean. I ended the call without reacting. I sent the recording to Camille. Camille called me back 10 minutes later. "He's not just a paperwork guy," she said. "He's involved. We're going to treat him like a central figure." "What do we do?" I asked. Camille didn't hesitate. "We file first. We request protective orders around assets. And we notify law enforcement about suspected fraud and identity misuse. Your credit report already supports that." That week, we moved fast. Camille filed separation paperwork with terms Savannah wouldn't like, terms that protected me, preserved evidence, and cut off access. Camille also sent formal notices to banks and insurers about potential fraud. Savannah responded the only way people like her respond when the game changes. She escalated. She sent me a long email, pages, framing me as unstable, accusing me of abandoning her, hinting that I had anger issues. She mentioned safety in a vague way. Camille read it and nodded slowly. She's building a narrative, Camille said. She wants you to look like the threat. That night, Grant called me. His voice was tight. Owen, he said, Whitney just took the kids to her sister's. She told me she needs space. And I found a draft email on our printer, an agreement with my name typed on it too. Same trap. Different house. Then he said the part that made the room spin. She's also asking about my life insurance again, Grant said. And she wants to meet tomorrow with a consultant to get everything organized. I didn't have to ask who the consultant was. Devin. I told Grant, don't go. Stall. Record everything. Get your attorney on the phone. Grant exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for days. There's more. He lowered his voice. I looked up Devin Ricks, he said. It's not even his real name. That's an alias. And he's been sued in 2 states for something that sounds exactly like this. My stomach dropped. I asked how he found that. Grant said, a friend in IT pulled public records. And Owen, there's a police report attached to one case. A guy like us, left his wife, then had a car accident before the divorce finalized. The word accident hung in the air. I didn't want melodrama. I didn't want paranoia. But this wasn't a movie. It was paperwork and money and people who decided morality was optional. When we hung up, I sat in the dark with my phone in my hand. A new message appeared from a number I didn't know. No name. Just a photo attachment. It was a picture of my house. Taken from across the street. The caption read, we should talk face to face. This can still be easy. I didn't go to the house. That was the old version of me, the one who thought he could solve everything by being reasonable. The new version understood something simple. When someone shows you they're willing to cross lines, you don't meet them on those lines to talk. I sent the photo to Camille immediately. Camille's reply came back fast, do not engage. Forward to police. Also, install cameras at Harper's. Tonight. Harper didn't love hearing that, but she didn't argue. We installed 2 simple cameras, one aimed at the apartment door, one aimed at the parking lot. Nothing fancy, just enough to create a record. Camille arranged a meeting the next day with a detective in the financial crimes unit. Not because I expected the police to swoop in dramatically, but because I needed my concerns documented before anything else happened. The detective, a tired-looking man named Ruiz, listened without making faces. He asked for copies, bank statements, the voicemail from Devin, the recording of our call, screenshots Grant provided, the unknown text with the house photo. When I finished, Ruiz leaned back and said, this pattern, it's not common, but it's not unheard of. He didn't say the word hitman. He didn't say anything dramatic. He said pattern, and that was enough. Ruiz asked for Devin's number. He asked for the name Devin Ricks. I told him what Grant had found, possible alias, civil suits. Ruiz nodded. We'll run it. Then he asked me a question that snapped something into focus. Have you signed anything recently that you didn't read closely? Ruiz asked. I thought about Savannah's adult stuff. The refinancing discussion she'd pushed last year. The document stack she'd set in front of me when I was rushing to work. My stomach turned. I might have, I admitted. But I don't remember what. Camille looked at me like she already knew. After the meeting, Camille and I went through my email history with a fine-toothed comb. We searched for attachments, forms, anything with words like policy, beneficiary, authorization, power of attorney. We found something from 8 months ago. An innocuous PDF Savannah had sent me titled Updated Info, Quick Sign. I remembered it. I'd signed on my phone while standing in line at a hardware store, annoyed and distracted. It had felt like a routine update. Camille opened it and went still. It wasn't a power of attorney. Not exactly. It was an authorization form giving Savannah permission to obtain information and make changes related to certain accounts and policies, where applicable, with my consent indicated by electronic signature. It wasn't airtight. It was sloppy. But it was enough to open doors if the person on the other end didn't look too closely. Camille exhaled slowly. This is why she was so confident. We moved again. Camille sent revocation notices to every relevant institution. She sent certified letters. She created a paper trail so thick it was practically a wall. Meanwhile, Grant's attorney was doing the same. Here's the part where the wow factor arrived. not in a sudden twist, but in a quiet detail that made everything make sense. Ruiz called Camille 2 days later. They'd run Devon's number and the alias. The phone line was prepaid and recently activated. But the device had been used to contact multiple numbers tied to similar civil suits, men who'd experienced sudden separations, followed by strange financial shifts and contested documents. Devon wasn't a random helper. He was a repeat operator. And he wasn't working alone. Ruiz asked if I could set up a controlled interaction, something that would get Devon to show his hand in a way that was usable. Camille didn't love the risk, but she also understood we needed something more than vibes and suspicion. So we did it the safe way, through attorneys and in public. Camille sent Devon a message, formal, calm, stating that all communication must go through counsel, and that any documents prepared using my typed name without my review would be considered fraudulent. Devon responded faster than a normal, paperwork guy would. He asked to resolve things amicably. He suggested a meeting. Camille agreed, at a law office conference room, with cameras, and with Ruiz nearby. Savannah showed up too. That was the part one didn't expect. I thought she'd keep distance, pretend ignorance, let Devon do the dirty work. But she walked in like she still owned the narrative. She looked at me with that same certainty I remembered from the kitchen. Then she saw Camille. She saw the camera. She saw Ruiz sitting quietly in the corner, not introduced as law enforcement, just a man taking notes. Her confidence wavered. Devon tried to steer the conversation, using a lot of words that meant nothing. He talked about settling, minimizing stress, avoiding court, being fair. Camille stayed polite and lethal. She asked Devon simple questions. Was he licensed? No. Was he authorized to prepare legal documents? He dodged. Did he advise Savannah to have me sign forms under misleading titles? He said he couldn't recall. Camille slid a printed copy of the quick sign PDF across the table. Devon's eyes flicked to it too fast. Savannah's lips tightened. Camille asked Savannah, evenly, why she'd been transferring money to Devon. Savannah claimed it was for financial coaching. Camille then slid over the bank records showing the transfers increasing in step with the divorce planning messages Grant had captured between Whitney and Savannah. Savannah's face changed. Not guilt, calculation. Like she was trying to decide which lie to use next. Then Ruiz stood up and introduced himself properly. He didn't raise his voice. He said, "This is now a criminal matter. You're free to leave, but I'm going to be requesting your devices and financial records through proper process." Devon's calm finally cracked. Not dramatically, just a tightening around his mouth, a momentary loss of control. Savannah looked at him like she'd expected him to save her. He didn't. That was the real twist, if you want one. Not that Savannah was cheating. Not that there was a consultant. It was that Savannah had mistaken Devon for loyalty. But men like Devon aren't loyal. They're transactional. Within a week, Whitney turned on Devon too, because once she realized law enforcement was involved, she stopped thinking about romance and started thinking about consequences. Grant told me later that Whitney tried to rewrite the story as if Devon had manipulated her and Savannah, like they were innocent victims of a mastermind. It didn't land. The money trail existed. The documents existed. The messages existed. Savannah tried to pivot on me next. She emailed friends and family vague statements about protecting herself. She hinted I was controlling. She tried to make me look dangerous without accusing me directly. Camille anticipated it. She filed for a protective order around harassment and identity misuse, based on the fraudulent paperwork, the house photo text, and the credit inquiries. The judge granted temporary restrictions quickly. And just like that, Savannah's favorite weapon, narrative, got blunted by something she couldn't talk her way out of. Facts. The divorce wasn't fast. Nothing legal ever is. But the outcome was satisfying in the only way real life is satisfying, not with a grand speech, but with consequences. Savannah didn't get to quietly strip the equity. The court froze asset movement pending review. Devon's consulting operation got investigated properly, not just sued in civil court. Grant and I both retained our primary assets and untangled our finances before more damage could be done. And Savannah, who had told me I'd beg, ended up asking for a simple agreement later, once she realized she'd lost leverage. I didn't gloat. I didn't send a revenge text. I didn't need to. Because the final moment, the one that actually healed something in me, was small. Months later, when everything was settled enough that my body stopped living in constant alert, I drove past the old house one afternoon. A new family lived there. Different cars. Different porch decor. Different life. I didn't feel rage. I felt relief. Not because I won, but because I finally understood the cost of being the man who always tries to keep things smooth. That man gets used. I'm not that man anymore. And the last time I ever spoke to Savannah directly was in a courthouse hallway, when she tried to catch my eye like she could still pull me back into her gravity. I didn't give her anger. I didn't give her tears. I just gave her the truth she couldn't rewrite. I looked at her once, nodded politely, and walked away, steady, boring, free. And this time, I didn't say maybe. I didn't leave any door open at all.